IELTS Academic Writing Task 1, Describing Process. Task 1 requires candidates to look at a diagram or some data in a graph, table, or chart, and to present the information in their own words. They are assessed on their ability to organize, present and possibly compare data, and are required to describe the stages of a process, describe an object or event, or explain how something works. When you approach Task 1, remember that you are not writing a standard essay like you would in English class or even for other tests. Task 1 is more like a report than it is like an essay. You should not put your personal opinion in Task 1. Luckily, no thesis is required, so you won't need to present your opinion. A high-scoring Task 1 essay will have 3 to 4 paragraphs. Paragraph 1 should be a very basic description of the visuals, the charts, graphs, or other images included in the question. If you don't know where to start, remember that it's often possible to simply paraphrase information from the prompt and the headers on the visuals in 1 to 2 sentences. Just make sure that you are paraphrasing and using different vocabulary as much as possible. Paragraph 2 should provide an overview of the key information from the visuals. You still don't need details from the visuals in this paragraph, so forget about specific numbers for now. Just provide a general overall description of the 2 or 3 most interesting pieces of information shown on the visuals. In paragraphs 3 and 4, it's time to include key details from the visuals. To do this, return to the visuals and find numbers that directly relate to the points you made in paragraph 2. For Task 1, study words and phrases that you can use to describe visuals and make comparisons. This includes describing increase or decreases over time, describing increases or decreases of various sizes or degrees, slight, drastic, huge, minor, significant, etc., and describing time over the last 5 years, during this period, by 2016, from 2012 to 2015, etc. Model IELTS Academic Writing Task 1, Prompt, Line Graph. The chart below gives information about population growth in 3 major Australian cities from 1992 to 2016. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and making comparisons where relevant. Model Essay. This line graph shows the change in population for the cities of Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane from 1992 to 2017. While all the cities experienced a net increase in annual population growth by 2011, and the most dramatic increases happened between 2007 and 2010. In spite of this overall trend, there were a number of rises and falls in growth, with all cities showing a decrease in growth in 2011. Although it started out with the least annual growth, Melbourne's growth accelerated the most overall, starting with only a roughly 23,000 increase in people in 1992, but gaining around 110,000 people in 2017. Brisbane started out with nearly as little growth as Melbourne, but had a lower net gain, rising from slightly over 23,000 growth in 1992 to a gain of merely 50,000 by 2017. Sydney started out with the highest growth rate at 30,000 in a year, but ended with 105,000 annual growth by the end of the period, just behind Melbourne. Why does this essay have a Band 9 score? Task achievement. For the instructions, this essay summarizes the information by identifying the main features in paragraph 1, reporting the general content of the main features in paragraph 2, and making relevant comparisons between the cities in the graph in paragraph 3. This matches Band 9 fully satisfies all the requirements of the task. Model IELTS Academic Writing Task 1. Prompt, Process Diagram. The diagram below gives information about the recycling of glass and plastic containers. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and making comparisons where relevant. Model essay. This flowchart shows the differences and similarities in the life cycles of glass and plastic containers, from creation and use to recycling and recreation. This diagram reveals both similarities and differences in the way that plastic and glass goods are made, recycled, and then made anew. The processes have more differences than similarities, but there are some more significant differences in the earlier stages of the recycling process. The initial collection and transport of both goods are the same. However, after that, glass is sorted by color and may then be immediately crushed, while plastic is sorted by quality and must be bundled before it can be shredded. Once the glass is crushed and the plastic is shredded, the processes become more similar again. At this point, both the glass and plastic pieces are washed, and then melted and reshaped into new products. These final steps are nearly identical, although the melting and reshaping of the glass must be done by two separate machines rather than one. Model IELTS Academic Writing Task 1. Prompt, bar chart. The chart below gives information about the ratio of income to spending, in dollars, by Americans by age range in 2013. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features, and making comparisons where relevant. Model essay. This graph compares how much Americans spent to how much income they made in 2013 by age group. The data shows an overall rise and fall in both income and spending between young, middle-aged, and older Americans. Income rises and falls more sharply than spending. Those under 25 and over 75 actually spent slightly more than they earned. In contrast, between the ages of 25 and 64, Americans earned $10,000 to $20,000 more than they spent. This difference shrinks in the 65 to 74 age group, where spending was just a few $1,000s less. In terms of actual numbers, those under 25 or over 75 earned and spent around $30,000 and $35,000, respectively. 25 to 34-year-olds and 65 to 74-year-olds both earned in the 50,000s and spent in the 40,000s. In the middle, between ages 35 and 64, income was $70,000 to $80,000, and spending ranged from roughly $55,000 to $60,000. Model IELTS Academic Writing Task 1. Prompt, map. The diagrams below show changes that have taken place in the Sora district neighborhood since 1920. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features, and making comparisons where relevant. Model essay. This pair of maps depict change over the course of a century in the Sora district neighborhood by showing the area in 1920 and 2020. The overall change in the neighborhood is one of growth. By 2020 there are more businesses, more housing, and greater public services. However, not all businesses and services remained intact after 1920. Business and housing saw the most change and growth. The cannery present in 1920 was replaced by an office complex. Two of the houses near the Elmwood River were demolished and replaced by a road and an apartment complex. Oak Avenue went from having 2 houses and a shop to having 3 houses, 2 shops, an apartment complex, and a petrol station. The change in public services was less significant than the change in housing and businesses. Prestwich Primary School was demolished and then rebuilt as a bigger school, closer to Oak Street's shops. And Elmwood River gained a bridge and a bike path, the latter of which replaced the small beach seen on the 1920 map. Model IELTS Academic Writing Task 1. Prompt, pie chart. The chart below gives information about the household percentage of spending on essential goods in China for the years 1995 and 2011. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features, and making comparisons where relevant. Model essay. The two pie graphs show differences in Chinese household spending in 4 essential categories. These categories are marked as percentages of total spending, with differences in spending for 1995 and 2011. Food and clothing remained the largest categories in both years, with medicine and household goods remaining the smallest. Nonetheless, there were measurable changes in all 4 categories over the years. Changes to the household budget shares of food and medicine were particularly noticeable. Both of the top 2 categories, clothing and food, shrank during this 16-year period. Clothing lost just 1% of its share, going from 19% to 18%, while food dropped more dramatically, starting at 68%, but losing 9 points of share by 2011. In both 1995 and 2011, medicine and household goods represented the lowest and second lowest spending categories, respectively. Still, both gained a larger share of household spending in China by 2011. Medicine jumped 7 points from 4% to 11%, while household goods made a smaller, but still noticeable increase from 9 to 12%. This graph compares the data shows an overall rise. In terms of actual numbers, respectively, roughly, this flowchart shows the differences and similarities. This diagram reveals once at this point, this line graph shows the change. Although it started out with this pair of maps depicts the overall change in however, the change in was less significant than the change in. Nonetheless, there were measurable changes in particularly noticeable were dropped dramatically.